Welcome to the Fun Astrology and Merriman Market Analyst Saturday Financial Podcast. I'm Thomas Miller. Thanks for joining us. Welcoming back now Ray Merriman. This is his article after being gone for several weeks. This is published every weekend on MMAcycles.com. There's a free newsletter tab at the top, and that's where you can go to this if you'd like to read along or catch the announcements that are also below the newsletter. This is written for the week of April 14th, but always we review before we look forward. And the first comment from the news is from Dr. Paul Donovan from UBS Morning Comment on April 10th. He said to his team, United States President Trump's retreat from trade taxes took less than 24 hours. However, taxes on imports from China increased and the universal 10% import tax stays in place. The big lesson from this is policy remains very, very erratic. Policy competence will be questioned by markets. Chaotic confusion about the tariffs on Mexico and Canada suggests the lack of a master plan. The winning strategy for everyone else is to hang tough and wait for Trump to retreat. Repeated policy uncertainty will hamper investment into the United States." End quote. Then also from April 10th, from the Wall Street Journal, the incomparable Peggy Noonan says, "History arises under many forces and from many causes, but the psychology of its leaders has its place. Mr. Trump is a gambler by nature. He places big bets. He has all of his professional and political life. The thing about gamblers is that all are looking to lose. They want to win, hope to win, but need the possibility of catastrophic loss to excite them, to keep them interested in life. Mr. Trump this week placed one of the biggest bets of his life, but it was the world's money that was in the pot. That was some kind of ugly, reckless thing to do." End quote. Now, Ray's commentary, and welcome back, Ray. He says the retrograde chaos period finally comes to an end this week. After last week's market convulsions, it couldn't happen a moment too soon. Stock markets around the world cratered early last week, but by the end of the week, several global stock indices made partial recoveries to give at least a sign of hope for investors going forward. Our call for this year in the Forecast 2025 book and audiobook was that many global stock indices, including the Dow Jones Industrial Average, would decline 15 to 26% in value from their all-time high or multi-year highs due to the time band for the 3-year cycle low that is now in effect from April 2025 to April 2026. That has now happened to nearly every global stock index we track. The question now is whether or not it's over, or will there be further deterioration of equity values to qualify for an 18-year cycle trough or a decline of 35 to 65% off all-time or multi-year highs that formed between December 2024 and early March of 2025? Question mark. Let me just take an aside here to explain that because it's a very important paragraph. First of all, what he was saying is that the Forecast 2025 book is your Bible and guide for this year. When I narrated the audiobook, I remembered exactly what he was mentioning here. Much of MMA Cycles and Ray Merriman's work has been, and the concept is in the title, MMA Cycles, because the basis of Ray's work is that cycles appear in the sky and then they appear on Earth. He has been saying in here that we are at the end of a 3-year cycle, so the market was due for a setback correction, simply based on that cycle. And that cycle was ending based on time, not on politics. Then there's another 18-year cycle that we are also approaching the end, but it's not as imminent as the 3-year cycle. The 3-year cycle was April 2025 to April 2026. That decline took place under the Trump tariff announcements. Ray is saying, will there be more? And then he was saying, will there be a further decline based on the 18-year cycle? That's why that paragraph that he mentioned is the basis of what's going on right now and was pretty much the basis of the Forecast 2025 book, which has a lot more in detail. Now let's continue on with Ray's comments. He says 2 exceptions to last week's bear market growl were noted in gold and currency markets. Gold soared to another new all-time high, rallying from a pullback to a major cycle low of 2970 last Monday, April 7th. As Venus conjoined Saturn and Mercury recently turned direct, reaching a new high of 3263 on Friday. This just happened to fit in perfectly with our analysis of gold that was given in last Sunday's Snap webinar, stating that the 2975 to 3000 level marked the new baseline for support in gold, and a new all-time high could be achieved by the time Venus turned direct, which is this weekend. The rally in the stock market and in silver, following the early week's low, also fit very well with the analysis made in that presentation. In addition to the rally in metals, several major currencies, such as the Swiss franc, euro, and yen, also soared to new multi-year highs. Treasuries, on the other hand, had a panic attack and suffered a sudden and alarming sell-off as the world began to doubt the faith and goodwill of American leadership and their financial system. Now the short-term geocosmics and longer-term thoughts. Again, from Peggy Noonan's article from April 10th in the Wall Street Journal, she said it wasn't good to let the world know or remind it so vividly that the way to get America to back off is to tank its bond market. Those bonds, as Zanny Minton Beddoes of The Economist put it, are the ultimate faith asset. The world has been reminded that they could become the ultimate weak spot. End quote. That is the main thing that your narrator here has been concerned about all week. And from that Economist article from April 10th, Zanny Minton Beddoes says, "This show has only one protagonist who matters, Mr. Trump. There is no tariff strategy beyond his whims. Although Mr. Trump blinked yesterday, don't think that this tariff show is over. America is still engaged in a brutal tit-for-tat trade war with China. The damage of the past week cannot easily be undone. Yes, markets have recovered from a near meltdown, but Mr. Trump has upended the old certainties that underpinned the global economy and introduced extraordinary levels of volatility and confusion. We are, as our cover title says, in the age of chaos." End quote. Now Ray says, "Hey, that's my term for this year." The good news is that the quote-unquote retrograde chaos period, a term I coined back in December to describe the year 2025, concludes this weekend as the last of the back-to-back retrograde cycles of personal planets, Venus in this case, ends. The not-so-good news is that the economic chaos does not end, as President Trump did not conclude his tariff negotiations with the rest of the world. He only paused the threat of tariffs for 90 days, which will bring the next explosive period squarely into the crosshairs of the Jupiter square Saturn-Neptune orb of influence. This is the major aspect of 2025, indicating possible hysteria and panic, exactly in mid-June, just a couple of weeks before his next proclaimed tariff assault will begin, if his demands are not met. If the negotiations don't find satisfactory results even by mid-May, hysteria is apt to increase as he prepares for round 2 of the next step, which is outer planet chaos. Interestingly enough, the peak of the outer planet's ingresses and aspects is June 15th, one day after President Trump's 79th birthday. It will be the dominant cosmic signature of the next year of his life. The influence of a solar return chart actually begins 90 days before one's birth date, so it's already manifesting. In addition to Jupiter of exaggeration, square to both Saturn, control struggles and obstacles of delay, and to Neptune, lack of controls, there is also a potentially dangerous Mars-Uranus square unfolding then, with transiting Mars conjoining Mr. Trump's natal ascendant and Mars. This is yet another key dynamic in his solar return chart for the year. His status could be in jeopardy if his master economic plan is not working out. The stock market could tank into not just a 3-year cycle low, but possibly an even more destabilizing 18-year cycle trough. That Mars-Uranus square is of major interest because Uranus is already in the midst of its conjunction with the Sun-Mercury conjunction in the founding chart of the New York Stock Exchange, the NYSE, which was founded on May 17, 1792. Transiting Uranus is also in a square aspect to the NYSE natal Pluto, which is in Aquarius. This transiting cosmic hard aspect has been in effect since May of 2024, and it will end right about that time that transiting Mars will square Uranus in late Taurus on June 15th. With the all-time high in U.S. stocks occurring between December of last year and February of this year, and then the huge sell-off since then, it is apparent that Uranus, the planet of sudden reversals and breakouts of yearly support and resistance zones, is very much in play now. This volatility could climax in mid-June. Can this ominous outlook be avoided? Of course, it can. All the president has to do is choose to wrap up the negotiations on trade agreements between himself and the rest of the world before mid-May, when the Sun conjoins Uranus, or by mid-June, which is the peak of the outer planet hard aspects. He has to actually close these deals with other countries besides Argentina. Americans, everyone, need to see that the world is on board with his vision, crude as it is being laid out, and that it is not just an obsession or delusionary fantasy of his imagination. End the chaos and uncertainty. Provide a sense of stability by bringing home deals going forward with the trade situation. Will he do it? Can he do it? Maybe. Transiting Jupiter of world trade will be entering Cancer of love of country, conjoining the United States natal Venus of money and Jupiter of hope and optimism. That's from mid-June through early July. That's a geocosmic dynamic that could help the United States regain its mojo. It could end this nonsensical pattern of retreat, start, retreat, start that has been so ongoing during this retrograde chaos of early 2025 and is likely to continue for another 2 months or so if this course of action doesn't show results soon. For this week, we note that Venus not only turns direct, but it is still in an orb of conjunction with Saturn from April 7th through the 25th. People are worried, Saturn, about their finances and relationships, Venus, as well as the nations. This is significant because Saturn also conjoins the lunar north node in late Pisces early this week. Our studies have shown this to exhibit a 70% historical correlation to an economic slowdown, even a recession, within the year. People and nations will be defensive in financial matters as previously planned bold decisions are put on pause. The Saturn node conjunction might explain why so many are worried and a bit anxious about the future. We are moving from one huge Saturn cycle to another between August of 2024 and February of 2026. It is also the heart of the Aries vortex. It can feel as if falling into an abyss, a black hole. But there is a bottom to this plunge into the unknown. Saturn periods require patience. Patience is a lot harder to acquire than information or knowledge, which is often not truth. But when you evolve in both of these steps, usually through experience, it leads to wisdom. This is the time to be patient, not impatient, to be reflective, not reactive, and develop wisdom. Wisdom provides the light that leads one out of the tunnel of darkness. Ponder this, don't ponder that. And that's this week's newsletter. There is another pop-up webinar that's happening on Sunday the 13th if you're interested, and that's in the top of the announcements section at MMAcycles.com. Thanks so much for listening. This has been so important, and I hope that you are paying attention. Back with the Fun Astrology podcast on Monday all week. We have some good aspects coming up, so be sure to check us out on the audio podcast and on YouTube. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you on Monday.